Martha woke up early that morning, as she did every day. At 78 years old, her body no longer kept up with her spirit, but her routine was a source of comfort. In the small house where she had lived for nearly 5 decades, every corner told a story. The walls were adorned with photographs yellowed with time, her wedding with her late husband, William, the first steps of her children, Peter and Ellen, and the birthdays and graduations she had celebrated with such enthusiasm. With her apron already tied around her waist, Martha brewed fresh coffee, sliced bread she had baked the previous night, and set the table with the care of someone expecting special company. Peter and Ellen had said they would visit that morning, a rare opportunity to have them together under the same roof. Just the thought of it filled her heart with joy. "My wonderful mother," she murmured to herself, looking at her reflection in the living room mirror as she adjusted her gray hair. William used to call her that, and she loved to remember the phrase. Despite the challenges she had faced as a widow, she was always proud of what she had built for her children. She had sacrificed everything to give them education, comfort, and above all, love. The sound of a car pulling up brought her back to the present. Martha opened the door and saw Peter and Ellen getting out of the car. Both were well dressed, with the hurried expressions typical of people who had too much to do. But to Martha, they were still the same kids who used to run through the house, leaving everything in disarray. "Mom." Ellen smiled, hugging her quickly. "You look great." "Oh, my dear, it's your love that keeps me this way," Martha replied, hugging her tightly. Peter appeared right behind, handing her a box of chocolates. "I brought this for you, Mom." "How thoughtful, Peter," she said, touching his face. "Come in. I've made coffee and fresh bread." Inside the house, as they ate, Martha savored every second of hearing about her children's lives. Peter talked about his business, and Ellen spoke of her children, whom Martha could barely keep up with because of Ellen's work. Martha smiled, trying to ignore the sadness of realizing how distant her grandchildren were. After a few minutes of conversation, Peter put his cup on the table and said, "Mom, we have a surprise for you." "A surprise?" Martha's eyes lit up. "Yes," Ellen continued, with forced enthusiasm. "Today, we're taking you to a special place." "A special place? How wonderful!" Martha sat up in her chair, excited. "Let me grab my purse and put on my necklace." As she got ready, Ellen exchanged a knowing look with Peter. He sighed, fiddling with his phone as they waited. Martha got into the car, watching the scenery pass by through the window. At first, she tried to guess the destination: a park? A restaurant? Maybe a surprise visit to the grandchildren? Her heart filled with anticipation. But gradually, she realized the direction didn't make sense. They were heading to the farthest part of town, where there were only buildings and offices. Turning a corner, Martha saw the sign, "Serenity Residence, Elderly Care Home." Her smile vanished. "Peter, what are we doing here?" "Mom," Ellen said, turning to her in the back seat. "We think this is the best place for you. Here, you'll have people to take care of you all the time." Martha felt a lump in her throat. "But I don't need this. I have my house, my things. I can take care of myself." "Mom," Peter interrupted, in a pragmatic tone. "It's the best for everyone. Ellen and I have our lives, our jobs. We can't always be available." She looked at both of them, incredulous. "Are you saying you no longer have room for me?" Ellen tried to soften it. "It's not that, Mom. It's just that, you'll be better cared for here." Martha said no more. When the car stopped, she got out hesitantly, clutching her purse tightly as if it were the only thing that still belonged to her. A staff member from the home greeted her with a rehearsed smile, and Peter handed over a folder with documents. "All set, Mom." "They've got everything organized," Ellen said, squeezing her shoulder. "We'll visit you soon." "Soon," Martha repeated, in a voice that seemed to come from far away. The children gave her a quick hug and got into the car. Martha stood at the entrance, watching the vehicle disappear around the corner. Only when she was alone did reality finally hit her. She looked at the imposing building and walked in, feeling like a discarded piece of a life she had helped build. Martha's first days in the care home felt like walking through an endless corridor of lost memories. Every sound, every smell was unfamiliar. The scent of disinfectant in the rooms, the distant echo of footsteps in the halls, and the muffled voices of conversations made her feel like a prisoner. She avoided interacting with anyone. Mornings were spent sitting by the window in her room, watching the trees sway outside, trying to ignore the emptiness enveloping her. She had raised her children to be successful, always prioritizing their needs above her own. How could they discard her like this? And now, what remained? A bland routine in a place where time seemed to drag endlessly. In the second week, a caregiver named Linda, a cheerful woman with curly hair and a warm demeanor, insisted that Martha eat in the dining hall instead of taking her meals alone in her room. "Come on, Mrs. Martha," said Linda with a smile. "You'll enjoy meeting the others. And honestly, I can't listen to Mr. Gerald complain about the soup anymore. He needs someone else to argue with." Against her will, Martha complied. In the dining hall, she saw groups of elderly residents scattered across tables, some chatting, others eating silently. Some seemed happy, but most appeared as lost as she felt. Linda helped Martha sit next to Gerald, a thin man with white hair and thick glasses. He greeted her with a grumble but quickly started talking. "This soup is a crime against taste buds," he said, pointing at his plate. "They call this vegetable soup, but I swear I've never seen a carrot so mushy." Despite herself, Martha smiled. There was something amusing about Gerald's tone, as if complaining was his way of feeling alive. At the same table sat Edith, a woman with a sweet voice but sharp, curious eyes. "Are you new here, dear?" she asked. Martha nodded. "Yes, I arrived a few days ago." "Ah, welcome to the club," said Edith with a slight smile. "It's not the place we dreamed of for our golden years, but it's better than being alone." Martha didn't respond, but something in Edith's sincerity struck a chord. As the days passed, Martha began noticing the caregivers more closely. Linda, who had helped her in the dining hall, quickly became one of her favorites. Always attentive, Linda treated the residents with genuine respect, calling them by name and remembering small details about their lives. There was also Carlos, the maintenance man, a burly man with calloused hands and a soft heart. He loved telling jokes while fixing things and always made a point of asking how the residents were doing. These small interactions began to show Martha that the care home wasn't as cold and impersonal as she had imagined. Humanity existed there, even amidst the sadness. One Tuesday afternoon, Martha heard a commotion in the main hall. Curious, she followed the noise and found a group of young people organizing an activity for the residents. They were volunteers from a local social project, distributing materials for a painting workshop and encouraging the elderly to participate. Among them was Anton, a slim man in his mid-30s with warm eyes and a calm way of speaking. He approached Martha, who was sitting alone, observing. "Do you like painting?" he asked with a friendly smile. "I haven't done it since school," Martha replied hesitantly. "Then it's time to start again," said Anton, placing a brush and palette in front of her. "If you don't like it, you can complain to me later." For the first time in days, Martha smiled. Anton's easygoing manner disarmed her, and she accepted the brush. He stayed by her side, chatting as she painted. He talked a bit about his 6-year-old daughter, Molly, and how volunteering was his way of reconnecting with what truly mattered in life. Anton seemed unlike anyone Martha had met in a long time. He listened attentively, asked about her life before the care home, and made her feel important again. After the workshop, Martha returned to her room feeling different. It wasn't happiness, but it wasn't the emptiness of before either. Perhaps the care home wasn't so terrible after all. There was Gerald with his funny complaints, Edith with her insightful observations, Linda and Carlos with their genuine dedication, and now Anton, with his selfless kindness. It still hurt to think about her children and how they had abandoned her. But for the first time, Martha began to realize that even here, there were people who cared about her. The days turned into weeks, and Martha began to adjust to life in the care home. It wasn't the home she had envisioned for her final years, but over time, she discovered something precious there, the human connections that slowly blossomed, like flowers growing in barren soil. Among all the people she met, Anton was her greatest surprise. He came every week, always with a smile and a word of encouragement. Sometimes, he brought small gifts, flowers from a local park, a book of poetry, or even a sweet treat he knew Martha enjoyed. In turn, she eagerly anticipated these visits, as they brought a sense of warmth she hadn't felt in months. One afternoon, while they sat together in the care home's garden, Martha sighed, gazing at the distant trees. "It's been months since I've been here. Not a single visit from my children, Anton. Not a letter, not a phone call. It's as if I've ceased to exist for them." Anton, seated beside her, gently touched her hand. "Martha, this has nothing to do with you. Some people don't realize the value of what they have, until it's gone." She shook her head, her eyes glistening with tears. "I gave them everything, Anton. Everything. And now I'm here, alone. Abandoned by the people I loved most in the world." Anton hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice low and trembling. "I would give anything to see my mother again. Just to talk to her one more time." Martha looked up at him, surprised by the emotion in his voice. He continued, struggling to compose himself, Sometimes it feels like we become orphans of our own families, doesn't it?" Martha felt a pang in her chest at his words. Gripping his hand tightly, she replied, "Yes, that's exactly it. But, maybe we found each other, Anton. Maybe we're the family we've chosen." The two laughed softly, but there was something profoundly true in their exchange. In the silence that followed, Anton murmured, "I'm lucky to at least have Molly. She's the reason I keep going every day." Martha leaned forward slightly, curious. "You've mentioned her before. Your daughter. Tell me more about her, Anton. I want to know." Anton looked at Martha, assessing the sincerity in her eyes. Finally, he relaxed and began to speak. "Molly is 6 years old. She's incredible. A spirit full of life, despite everything she's faced. She loves wearing costumes, playing princess, and her laughter can light up an entire room. She seems to have inherited a lot from you," Martha said with a smile. Anton smiled back, but his eyes revealed something deeper. He hesitated before continuing. "But Molly was born with a lung condition. It's something that limits a lot of things in her life. Even something as simple as running or playing for too long is a challenge." Martha remained silent, listening intently as Anton went on. "There's a treatment that could help her, something that could give her a normal life. But the cost is too high. My wife and I do the best we can, but it's nowhere near what we need." She saw the pain in his eyes, the silent struggle he carried. "It must be hard," she said softly. "But from the way you talk about her, I'm sure she has the best father in the world." Anton gave a sad smile. "I try. But there are days when I feel like I'm failing her. My wife works too much, I try to help as best I can, and yet I feel it's never enough." Martha reached out and touched his hand. "You do more than anyone could expect, Anton. And from what you've told me, Molly knows that." From that day on, their bond grew even stronger. Anton felt comfortable sharing stories about Molly, and Martha found comfort in listening to them. He talked about how Molly loved to paint and how she had a collection of tiaras she wore every day. Martha, in turn, shared stories of her own children, of how Peter and Ellen were as kids before the emotional distance grew. As the months went by, the two became inseparable. Anton was the ray of sunshine in Martha's weeks, and she was the maternal figure he deeply missed. Together, they found a way to heal the wounds life had left behind. That night, as Anton drove home, he felt something shift inside him. Martha wasn't just someone he helped, she was family he had chosen. And for the first time in years, Martha didn't feel alone. She had found a new purpose, a new reason to smile, even amidst the pain of abandonment. Anton and Molly were the new lights in her life, a reminder that true love can appear in the most unexpected places. The weeks passed slowly, and Martha watched the leaves on the trees change color through her bedroom window. Time seemed to flow differently in the care home, as if each day was a reminder of her new reality. Her children hadn't sent a single letter, nor made a phone call. The abandonment was so complete it hurt more than anything she had ever experienced. Sitting in the rocking chair Anton had helped her get, Martha looked at her wrinkled hands. She remembered the sacrifices she had made, the sleepless nights when Peter had a high fever, the savings she and William had accumulated to ensure Ellen could attend the college she had dreamed of. It all seemed so far away now. A thought emerged in her mind, clear and inescapable: if they don't want anything to do with me, then they don't need what I've saved for them. Martha knew her time was running out. Every movement felt harder, every breath heavier. But there was still something she could do, something that could give meaning to her remaining days. She knew exactly who she wanted to entrust with her secret inheritance. That afternoon, Anton arrived at the care home as he did every week. He carried a bag of homemade cookies his wife had baked, knowing that Martha loved a sweet treat with her coffee. When he entered the garden, he saw Martha sitting under a tree, her eyes fixed on some distant point. "Martha," he said, approaching with a smile. "I brought something special today." She looked up at him and smiled, but there was a melancholy in her eyes he couldn't ignore. "Sit with me, Anton. I want to talk." Anton sat beside her, placing the bag between them. "What's on your mind? You seem thoughtful today." Martha took a deep breath, gripping her cane tightly. "You know, Anton, when I was young, my husband William always said the most important thing we could leave for our children was our love and the values we taught them. But sometimes, I wonder, did they understand that?" Anton didn't respond immediately. He knew that behind Martha's words was the hurt caused by Peter and Ellen's neglect. "Martha," he finally said, "you did everything you could for them. If they can't see the value in that, it's not your fault." She nodded, touching his hand. "I know that now. And that's why I want to do something meaningful. Anton, I want to make your greatest dream come true." He was taken aback. "My greatest dream?" "Yes," she replied, with a gentle smile. "Tell me, Anton, if you could wish for anything in the world, what would it be?" Anton hesitated, looking at his hands. He had spoken about Molly and her condition before, but he had never dared to dream of a solution. Still, the words escaped his lips before he could stop them. "I just want Molly to have a normal life. To be able to run, play, and live like any other child." Martha smiled, as if she had expected this answer. She gripped her cane and struggled to her feet. "Come with me. I want to show you something." Anton helped her walk back to her room. It was simple and organized, with a few items Martha had brought from her old home. She opened the drawer of a small cabinet and took out a rusty key. "This key is for a special place," she said, handing it to Anton. "It's for you. I want you to go to this address and see what's there." Anton looked at the key, confused. "Martha, what is this?" She smiled, her eyes glistening with tears. "Something I've kept for years. Something my children never valued. They think I have nothing to offer. But they're wrong." "Martha, I can't accept this," Anton said, trying to return the key. "You saved this for your family. And you are my family now," she said firmly. "Please, Anton. Do this for me. For Molly." Seeing the sincerity in her eyes, Anton knew there was no use arguing. He slipped the key into his pocket and hugged her, feeling the weight of her decision. "I'll do it, Martha. I promise I'll make something good out of this." That night, after Anton left, Martha sat in her rocking chair and gazed at the moon through the window. She felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. For the first time, she felt she was leaving behind something truly valuable, not for those who had ignored her, but for someone who truly mattered. She knew her time was nearing its end, but she was ready. She had found her new family, and with it, a final purpose. Anton parked his car in front of the address Martha had given him. It was an old house, seemingly abandoned, with broken windows and peeling paint. The wind blew softly, rustling the nearby trees, but the place seemed cloaked in a heavy silence, as if it were waiting to reveal its secrets. He took the rusty key from his pocket and held it for a moment, hesitating. The weight of Martha's gesture still echoed in his mind. Finally, he took a deep breath and walked up to the front door. The key turned with difficulty in the lock, as though it hadn't been used in years. When the door creaked open, Anton stepped into the dark, dusty house, his footsteps echoing on the worn wooden floor. The furniture was covered with sheets stained by time, and a thin layer of dust coated everything. The place seemed frozen in time. Old photographs on the walls showed smiling faces, moments of joy that were now mere memories. Anton walked slowly, looking around until he spotted a small cabinet in the corner of the living room. He tried to open it, but it was locked. Then he noticed another lock on the bottom drawer. Using the same key, he opened the drawer and found a small wooden box, aged and dusty. Anton carefully took the box and placed it on a table. When he opened the lid, he found a collection of old photographs, yellowed letters, and small sentimental keepsakes, a brooch, a worn wedding ring, a handkerchief embroidered with Martha's initials. He began sifting through the contents with care, feeling as though he were flipping through the pages of Martha's life. Every photograph, every letter seemed to tell a part of her story: her marriage to William, the early years of her children, birthday celebrations, seaside vacations. Then he noticed something peculiar. The base of the box had a groove, as if it could be removed. With delicate movements, Anton pushed the base and revealed a false bottom. Inside was a small cloth pouch, tied with a faded cord. When he opened the pouch, he gasped. Inside were sparkling jewels, pearl necklaces, rings adorned with precious stones, delicately crafted gold earrings. He held one of the pieces up to the faint light streaming through the dirty windows, marveling at its brilliance. For a moment, Anton stood still, trying to process what he had found. He knew these jewels were worth a great deal of money. It was a treasure that could change lives. Back at the care home, Martha was sitting in her rocking chair, gazing out the window. When Anton entered her room, she turned her head and smiled. "You went there," she said before he could speak. Anton placed the box on the table beside her and sat down. "Martha, this is far more than I ever expected. You kept all this for so long?" She nodded, her gaze fixed on the box. "William gave me these jewels over the years. He always said they were for our children, in case they ever needed something in the future. After he passed, I kept saving them, waiting for the right moment." Anton looked at her, his eyes shining with emotion. "Why are you giving this to me, Martha? Don't you think they still deserve to know?" Martha shook her head slowly. "They've already forgotten me, Anton. I don't want this to become another reason for their indifference. These jewels were meant to help someone who truly needs them. And now, I know that you, Molly, and your wife need them more than anyone else." Anton tried to protest, but Martha raised her hand, silencing him. "I've made my decision, my son. I want you to use this to give Molly the life she deserves. This is my gift to you." To her. Anton held Martha's hand, his eyes brimming with tears. "Martha, I don't have the words. I promise I'll use this wisely. I promise to honor your generosity." She smiled, squeezing his hand tightly. "I know you will." That night, as Anton drove home, he could barely contain his emotions. He knew that this treasure was much more than money. It was the love and sacrifice of an entire lifetime. It was proof that Martha trusted him and believed he could do something good with it. When he got home, he told his wife about what had happened. Together, they began to think about what to do. First and foremost, they would sell some of the jewels to pay for Molly's treatment. But there was something else Anton wanted to do, to give Martha the dignity she deserved, just as she was giving them hope for a better life. Anton held the small pouch containing the jewels as he walked through the office of an appraiser of precious assets. The expert, a middle-aged man with an experienced gaze, carefully examined each piece one by one, assessing their value. When he finally gave the estimate, Anton felt the ground shift beneath his feet. It was far more than he had imagined. That evening, he returned home, where his wife, Laura, was waiting anxiously with Molly. They sat at the kitchen table, and Anton shared the appraiser's evaluation. For a moment, the couple remained silent, absorbing the significance of what it meant. "This is more than enough for Molly's treatment," Laura said, her eyes filling with tears. "She'll finally have the chance to live like any other child." "And not just that," Anton replied, holding her hand. "I want to do something for Martha. She gave us this with so much love. I can't leave her there, in that care home, alone." Laura agreed. "What do you have in mind?" Anton smiled, a plan already forming in his mind. "We'll buy her a house. A place near us, where we can take care of her as she deserves." In the days that followed, Anton divided his time between selling the jewels, organizing the start of Molly's treatment, and continuing his visits to Martha. He didn't want her to think, even for a moment, that he had forgotten her. During each visit, he brought updates. He told her how Molly had had her first consultation with a specialist, how the initial tests showed that the treatment had a high chance of success. Martha listened attentively, smiling softly as she heard the enthusiasm in his voice. "You're doing wonderful work, Anton," she said. "Molly is lucky to have you as a father." "And I'm lucky to have you as family," he replied, holding her hand. "None of this would be possible without you, Martha." Despite the good news, Anton began to notice that Martha was becoming more fragile with each visit. Her voice was weaker, and she seemed to sleep more often. He knew her time was drawing to a close, but that only motivated him to work faster. He wanted to ensure she knew how much her generosity had changed their lives. Finally, Anton and Laura found the perfect house. It was small and cozy, with a backyard garden and a sunny porch. As they signed the purchase papers, Anton felt a wave of joy mixed with urgency. He couldn't wait to tell Martha the good news. On his way to the care home, he rehearsed every word. He wanted her to know the house was ready, that she would have a dignified home and the care she deserved. He wanted to see her face light up with happiness. When he arrived at the care home, the silence in the hallway felt different. Something in the air was heavier. Anton walked toward Martha's room, but before he could open the door, Linda, the caregiver, stopped him. "Anton," she said softly, her expression sorrowful, gripping his arm. "I'm so sorry. Martha passed away this morning." Her words hit Anton like a blow. He felt his legs buckle and had to lean against the wall for support. Linda placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "She left something for you," Linda said, handing him an envelope. Anton took the envelope with trembling hands. It was simple, with his name written in Martha's careful handwriting. He didn't open the envelope immediately. He slipped it into his pocket, feeling that he needed a special moment to read it. Before that, he wanted to say goodbye. Anton held the envelope with trembling hands. Sitting in the garden of the care home, he carefully opened the letter Martha had left for him. As he began to read, the words seemed to whisper directly to his heart. "Dear Anton, if you are reading this, it means my journey has come to an end. But know that my departure is not a reason for sadness. I lived my final days in peace, surrounded by the love I thought I would never find again. You gave me a gift I didn't even know I needed, the joy of being a mother once more. I knew my time was running out, and that's why I chose to entrust you with my greatest secret, my jewels, and above all, my heart. There is no monetary value that could surpass what you and Molly have given me. You gave me purpose, you brought life back to me when everything seemed lost. I want you to know I am at peace because I know Molly will have the chance to live fully. She will be surrounded by the love of a wonderful father and a family that values her. And I know you will do your best with the gift I left you. Life doesn't always give us the family we expect, but sometimes it gives us the family we need. You are my family, Anton, and I will forever be grateful for that. Please don't look back with regrets. Use each day to live with love and gratitude. When Molly runs through the fields, when she laughs without limits, know that I will be there, in every smile and every moment of joy. With all my love. Martha. When he finished reading, Anton remained motionless for a few moments. Emotion overwhelmed his chest like a tidal wave. He pressed the letter to his heart, feeling as though Martha was beside him, whispering words of comfort. He closed his eyes, letting the tears flow freely. "Thank you, Martha," he whispered. "I will never forget you." Still absorbing the depth of Martha's words, Anton made his way home. When he arrived, Laura immediately noticed the expression on his face. "She's gone, isn't she?" she asked, her voice low and full of empathy. Anton simply nodded, handing the house key to Laura as he sat down. He told her about the letter and how Martha had passed peacefully. The two sat in silence for a moment, holding hands. Molly, not fully understanding, approached and climbed onto her father's lap, hugging him tightly. Anton realized that, despite the pain of loss, he had something to celebrate, the love he still shared with his family. 2 days later, Anton dressed for Martha's funeral. He went alone, feeling that he needed this moment to say goodbye. At the cemetery, he stood at a distance while the ceremony took place. He watched Peter and Ellen, Martha's children, standing by the grave. Their expressions were neutral, emotionless, and their interactions were brief, as if they were fulfilling a duty. Anton felt a mix of anger and sadness. They hadn't appreciated her in life. What was the point of being here now? They hadn't brought flowers to her at the care home. What was the point of leaving flowers on her grave? But he quickly dismissed these thoughts. He knew Martha wouldn't want him to hold on to resentment. She had taught him the power of forgiveness. When the attendees began to disperse, Anton waited until the cemetery was empty. Then he walked slowly to the freshly covered grave. Martha's name was engraved on a simple headstone, accompanied by a phrase that deeply moved him: "True love leaves marks that time cannot erase." Anton placed a small bouquet of white flowers on the grave and knelt down. "Martha," he began, his voice trembling, "you gave me so much. More than I could ever repay. You showed me what truly matters in life, and I promise I will never forget that. Molly will have the life you dreamed for her. And thanks to you, I will be the father she deserves." He stayed there for a long time, speaking softly as if Martha could hear him. He told her about the plans for Molly, about the house they had bought, and about how Laura had suggested placing a photo of Martha in their living room, so she would always be present. "You're part of our family," he said, his voice full of emotion. "And you always will be." When he finally stood up, Anton gave one last look at the grave. "Goodbye, Martha. Thank you for everything." As he left the cemetery, he felt the wind softly brush against his face. It was as though Martha was there, letting him know she was at peace. Months had passed since Martha's funeral, but her presence remained alive in Anton's family's life. In the new home they had purchased, a special frame occupied a prominent place in the living room, a photo of Martha smiling, taken on one of the days Anton had visited her at the care home. It was impossible to walk past that picture without feeling a mix of nostalgia and gratitude. Molly, now fully recovering thanks to the treatment made possible by Martha's jewels, was transformed. She ran through the garden, something that once seemed like a distant dream. Anton watched her from the window as she played, wearing one of her princess tiaras. Each of Molly's laughs was a reminder of the impact Martha had left on their lives. "Molly, come inside." Laura called from the kitchen. "Dinner is almost ready." "I'm coming," Molly replied, running into the house with her cheeks flushed. As she passed Martha's photo, she paused for a moment and looked at it. "Daddy, do you think Miss Martha can see me from heaven?" Anton, who had just walked into the room, knelt beside her and smiled. "I'm sure she can, my princess. And you know what? I think she's very proud of you." Molly smiled back and ran to the kitchen, leaving Anton alone for a moment. He looked at Martha's picture and whispered, "Thank you, Martha, for everything." A few days later, Anton visited the cemetery with Molly. He wanted her to have the chance to thank, in her own way, the woman who had changed their lives. When they reached the grave, Molly placed a small golden tiara on the headstone. It was one of her favorites. "This is for Miss Martha," Molly said, looking at the grave. "Thank you for helping my mommy and daddy. And thank you for helping me play like the other kids." Anton smiled, moved, as he held his daughter's hand. They stood there for a few minutes in silence, and Anton felt the wind softly blowing around them. It was almost as if Martha was there, sharing the moment. On the way home, Anton reflected on everything that had happened over the past months. Despite the pain and hardships, Martha's story had left an indelible mark on their lives. She had taught him that true love isn't only found in blood ties but also in the choices we make to care for one another. Martha may have been forgotten by her biological children, but for Anton and his family, she would always be remembered as a symbol of sacrifice, love, and generosity. And as Molly ran through the fields and laughed freely, Martha remained present, like a light that would never fade. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment, and check out our next story.